Right, I didn't know that I was muted. So welcome once again to Jazz webinar today. Today's theme is the navigating the pharma and healthcare supply chain in this unprecedented times. Hello, my name is David Bang, and I'm an Executive Vice President, Pharma and Healthcare at Jazz. And we have an amazing lineup of a speaker, panelists, and moderators. And I have no doubt you will have something practical insights today. And also, I'd like to remind you that today's session is being recorded for future on-demand content. And also, you will have some opportunity to interact with our panelists and moderators through the Q&A chat room. Before we get started, I'd like us to take a moment to recognize and thank all the logistics and supply chain professionals out there, including Jazz team members in branches and countries all around the world. And also the healthcare workers, the nonprofit employees, the frontline workers, first responders, scientists and manufacturing workers. Without them, we would not had this rate and level of recovery. So thank you. Over the last 9 months, we've made a huge stride in global vaccination against COVID. Almost 1.9 billion vaccination as of yesterday. But that's still under 30% of the worldwide population. Therefore, we cannot slow down. We cannot put our guard down. And also, we should never forget is the daily death rate is still hovering around 6,500 people due to COVID. And that's not just a number, that's not a statistics. Those are the people with names, faces, stories, and so much more. Now, what are the three most frequently mentioned words describing the current situation in the supply chain? Congestion, capacity, and cost. And these are not just about ocean containers and vessels, but also the ports, the truck driver shortages, labor shortages in general, railroads, air freight, and warehouse spaces, etc. Also, what's even trickier for this industry, for pharma and healthcare, is that we need to always remember the patient safety. That's why you see the big plus sign with the compliance and the care. Now, this cannot be all blamed on COVID. Although COVID indeed pressured already a weaker links to their limits to be broken, but pre-COVID, we already had trade tensions. We already had issue with the lack of a transparency, a lack of a true partnership in vendor relationship, silo data, outdated and heavily manual and redundant processes. And many experts were already giving us warning sign. Also, what COVID taught us is that what's no longer true, what's no longer a rule of thumb. Size and scale did not matter much. Everyone suffered when air cargo belly space dried up overnight, ports shut down, Suez Canal blocked. Also, those who relied on transactional relationship with the partners and vendors suffer the most. And just in time, for the sake of being lean only, was also turned out to be very vulnerable. And digitalization is indeed a human behavior matter, not an IT matter. So the way forward will look a lot like having much more connectivity, much more collaboration, much more compassion. The compassion includes ESG, the environmental, social, and governance. And still, again, with the patient safety at the core of what we do, the care and compliance. Now, without further ado, it is my honor and privilege to introduce our esteemed keynote speaker, my industry comrade, Jim Freeze, CEO of RX360. Now, Jim has a long history of a success in the medical device, diagnostics, and life sciences industry, helping grow and lead numerous organizations. Jim also has been an delegate to the World Health Organization, as well as a part of the many FDA pathway teams and clinical guideline committees. Because of someone like Jim and in his RX360 team, I believe that the world of a supply chain of a pharma and healthcare is a safer and more secure. So Jim, whenever you're ready.
Thanks, David. I'm assuming that you can hear me okay.
I can hear you okay, fine, thank you.
And thanks for that introduction. It may be one of the top 3 introductions I've ever had in my life, so thank you. So I just want to kind of dive right in here because I think the theme was really set forth with the video that we saw while we were waiting to get everything started here today. And one of the themes that I saw there was this idea of joining together. And, if you go back pre-COVID, one of the things that we really started to look at from an idea of supply chain management and kind of what were normalized is one of my fears was that we were starting to operate in an element of almost silos. And to me, that's not something that long-term puts us in a position to succeed. And when we start to get into, okay, now as an industry, we're faced with COVID. What do we do? What things are changing rapidly. And I kind of started to look at over the last month, this whole idea of, as David and I have talked about previously, the idea of, is this an unprecedented short-term moment or is it the new normal? Well, to me, over the course of the last month, my brain has shifted in almost a totally different direction from where I was pre-COVID and really where I was at the beginning of COVID. To me, I don't look at this at all as unprecedented, short-term, or anything along those lines. What I look at it as, and I don't even look at it as a new normal standpoint, I'm starting to look at it as maybe we need to pay attention to this focus or this renewed focus that we have when it comes to supply chain management, especially in pharma and healthcare. When we kind of look at the idea of joining together, I could get 50 people in a room and look at everybody and say, hey, help me understand what supply chain means to you. I'd probably get 49 different answers out of those 50 people because everybody has their own siloed mindset of what it means. I have my own understanding of what it is. And then there's that idea of joining together and what our mindset around supply chain management should be. And really what's included in that. Is it the quality of the materials? Is it security? Is it logistics? Guess what? It's all of those. And it's really a domino effect. If one piece of that puzzle falls apart, then the whole idea of supply chain and supply chain security and the integrity of that all falls apart. And as David mentioned when he started us off today, ultimately it affects the patient. And that's what really scares me. And that's what I want to look at everybody that's part of this today and look at it from a call to action. Is work together and really take a look at what we're all doing when it comes to supply chain and the management of that supply chain. When you look at, the idea of has the world changed because of COVID? Sure, it has. I mean, we'd all be naive if it hasn't. But one of the more important things is to really take a look at that focus that we have and really kind of how we look at risk. And I actually appreciate, and you never want to take advantage of a negative. And let's face it, the pandemic that we've all experienced over the last couple of years has changed our lives. It's changed our parents' lives. It's changed our children's lives. What I want to do is kind of take that learning though and say, hey, let's not take anything for granted. let's look at that renewed focus that we now have and put it into action. Let's not think about working as in silos when it comes to our supply chain. And let's constantly be looking at how each and every component that we deal with on a daily basis touches each other. Whether it's somebody that's working with a pharmaceutical product that is focused in, counterfeiting and diversion. Well, how does the idea of the quality of the materials in that pharmaceutical product play into that? My gosh, if one doesn't touch the other, then it all falls apart. Yeah, and again, getting back to my theme when I first started is the idea of supply chain security and integrity. I mean, my gosh, if you're seeing my slide right now, it's probably the world's longest definition, and it is just a lot of words, which is why I stress to everybody, put meaning behind those words, pull out of the definition of supply chain and supply chain security and what it means to patients, pull out of that definition where you fit, and then think about where you fit and think about everybody else's definition and bring it together. People, I get phone calls every week and every day. And people ask me, hey, Jim, when you think about this whole supply chain thing, especially when it comes to pharmaceuticals, healthcare, what worries you? And to me, the three top things that really worry me, hands down, but I have an element of confidence because there's people like yourselves in the industry that are really working to mitigate any challenges that we have in these areas, counterfeiting and diversion. It's at an all-time high. It really is. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. It's just not supply chain issues or those type of things. There's market access issues. There's geography issues. There's demographic issues. But there's website issues and online pharmacies and all those type of things. But it's a piece of the puzzle. The quality of materials, to me, is something that we can't lose sight of. One of the great things that I saw the pharmaceutical industry do at the beginning of COVID was pivot in a very drastic way in regards to how we monitor and manage the quality of materials, moving from a lot of on-site auditors, on-site audits of our supply chain to the remote type of audits. Incredibly impactful. And I acknowledge and honor the industry for jumping on board and making that happen. I think it's that proactivity saves us a lot of headaches on the back end. And then transportation. I mean, I just read an article, I believe it was this morning or yesterday, in Forbes about some of the challenges that we have in transportation when it comes to supply chain management. All these things worry me, but again, I'm excited because we have great people in the industry that are attacking them. Is it the new normal? I would say that a lot of things that we're focused on right now are not the new normal, they're just the normal. And my common theme for today not only is that idea of working together, but it's to understand and acknowledge our renewed focus. And to me, the new normal should be, let's not lose that focus again. Let's not get into silos. Let's not take things for granted. Don't go back. Don't revert. Learn and incorporate everything that we're doing. And again, like I just mentioned, the big thing for me is, don't worry. I mean, I think we all have an element of worrying when we talk about supply chain management because there are challenges on a daily basis. But think about yourselves and think about your teams. We all work with incredibly impactful people, skilled people, people that care. So to me, that's why I don't worry. But also to me, at the same time, I'm rolling up my sleeves and like I know all of you are, and getting things done, paying attention, working together. One of the things I really acknowledge to people when we talk about this world of patient safety, working together, and installing that mindset of best practices when it comes to supply chain is ask questions. I think sometimes we run into situations where, when we deal with a lot of these issues, and, I told you some of the things that did work, we don't ask enough questions. Don't be scared to to ask questions of your industry peers. Don't be scared to challenge each other on best practices internally. That's ultimately what's going to win the day of patient safety. And it's that idea of pushing each other to be better. Industry togetherness. Industry togetherness is something that I live with every day at RX360. And because of that, that's why I can see us moving forward. It's an idea of really doing it together. And I think, a lot of the talks and panelists that you're going to see here today are going to get us there. But just don't use this conference this morning, today, wherever you might be. Don't just use this as a one-off. Use it as a springboard to say, okay, what am I going to take? What have I learned? And how am I going to make what I do and what my teams do and what my companies do more impactful when it comes to patient safety? That's what's important. Pat yourself on the back. You've done a great job as an industry. We've done a great job as an industry getting through the last 18 months. Let's not put ourselves in the position of taking that deep breath and stagnating. Let's keep moving it together. So really, to me, that was my message today to kickstart everybody. For those of you that don't know, number one, I wanted to say thank you. What a great way. I'm on the East Coast of the United States, so it's morning here. What a great way to start my day. Could not be more thankful to David Bang and the people at Jazz for allowing me to kickstart you. But for those of you that don't know, I am the CEO of RX360. We're an industry nonprofit consortium dedicated to supply chain security, the quality of its materials, but most importantly, patient safety. One of the things that I'm incredibly proud of is being able to bring industry together to solve some of these challenges that you'll talk about throughout the day. I also don't want this kickoff or keynote talk to be a one-off. So my contact information is there. My email is there. If anybody needs it, you can always reach out to David or the folks at Jazz, and feel free to reach out to me. I enjoy talking about things like this because I believe that conversations make us better. So again, thank you very much for your time today. And David, I'm going to send it back to you, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jim, for such a inspirational and encouraging words. And I just, once again, I really appreciate, and we appreciate what RX360 does and its membership. And again, like I said, I think the world is a better and more secure because of what you guys do over there. And I think I particularly like the fact that call to action, right? This is not just a one-off. We all take part in this, and we need to take actions to move forward. So I really appreciate that, Jim. Thank you so much for your time today. Yep. Okay, so once again, thank you to our keynote speaker, Jim, for such an inspirational message. Now I'm gonna call on our first panel moderator, Dina Bunn. I can see you already, and panelists to turn on their videos and microphone while I'm doing the view changes to the gallery view. And of course, so that everybody can see and I can make it into the proper view here. Okay, I see, do we have a buddy here? Dina, I'll hand it over to you then.
Thank you, David. Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you to our panel here on transparency, visibility, and data. I'm joined today by a great group of people. So first of all, my responsibility at Jazz is around the customer experience for our pharma and healthcare vertical. That includes any digital touch points that we have. So I'm very excited to be moderating this panel today. I want to remind everyone that the Q&A is open. There's a little button at the bottom of the screen. If you have any questions for any of the panelists, please feel free. You're invited to put them down there, and we will definitely get to them through the course of our discussion here. First, let me introduce the group to you, starting with Alexis McCubbin. So Alexis is the Vice President of Customer Solutions and Strategic Initiatives for our European and Middle East region here at Jazz. She's got nearly 20 years in the freight forwarding industry. Currently, her focus is on helping customers identify risk, excessive cost, and areas for improvement in their supply chains through the use of technology. So Alexis is based in Belgium, but she's a Texan at heart. So welcome to you, Alexis. Next up, we have Herman Ude. Herman is the former CEO of DHL Global Forwarding Freight. And since 2012, he's been involved in businesses in Europe that are driving digitalization throughout the continent. So he's chairman of the supervisory board for Transporion, which is a company that is really digitizing European transportation. He's also chairing the supervisory board of Prospitalia, which is Germany's leading purchasing service provider for the healthcare industry, or healthcare sector, I should say. And he's also a managing partner at TTS, which is a technology company in the space of digital transformation. So Herman is a real digital evangelist, and we're happy to have you with us today. Welcome, Herman.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Saravan Kumar. So Saravan is one of the founders and is the CEO of a company called MaxQ. They are a digital startup in the areas of cold chain packaging and IoT. They've developed a MaxTrace cloud engine, which provides predictive intelligence solutions to mitigate risks in shipping, to ensure safe delivery of life-saving biologics and temperature-sensitive medications. They currently serve over 800 healthcare and life science organizations, and we're really happy to have Saravan with us here today. They're based in Oklahoma City, I believe, in the US.
That's right. Good morning.
Welcome,
Gina.
welcome to you, Saravan.
Thank you.
And finally, I'm very happy to introduce Tom Madzey. Tom is the CEO of Jazz here, CIO of Jazz since March of this year. He has more than 30 years in the industry leading IT departments of transportation and logistics companies. His current focus at Jazz, self-proclaimed focus, is to further develop our best-in-class customer-facing solutions. He's overseeing a broad IT portfolio, which includes ERP, WMS, TMS, CRM, any acronym you can think of related to IT, and a global infrastructure, both on-premise and cloud solutions. So welcome to you, Tom.
Morning.
Good morning. So before we get started, we would like to get kind of a feel from the audience here about what's on your mind. So we'd like to conduct a little poll. We heard Jim tell us what worries him. And we'd like to know now maybe a little more in detail what worries you when you have shipments in transit. So what is the question that kind of keeps you up at night? Is it where's my shipment right now? Is it what condition is my shipment in right now? Is everything going okay according to the plan? Or is it what are you doing if it's not going okay? So let us hear your thoughts or see your thoughts about that. Please give you a couple seconds to answer that poll. And I see a lot of answers coming in. It's kind of neck and neck. A few more seconds and I will share the results with you. Still going strong. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. The suspense is killing you, I'm sure. All right, it looks pretty even, Stephen, across the board. David, maybe we want to share the results now. So there we have it. I guess the winner is it going according to the plan, but close second, tied between what condition is it in and what are you doing if it's not going okay. And then, of course, everyone, when we're shipping products, when our pharma and healthcare manufacturing colleagues are shipping products, we know it feels like it's a black hole out there. And so that's what we'd like to address a little bit today with our discussion around transparency, visibility, and data. So again, Q&A is open if you would like to put questions to the panel here in while we're waiting for questions, I'll go ahead and kick off with some discussion questions that we prepared in advance. And so we'll kind of go around the room a little bit to warm things up. I'd just like to hear, maybe starting with you, Alexis, what are the big differences you see between kind of the before times and the after times, before COVID, after COVID? What changes do you see?
Yeah, thank you, Dina. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Transparency and visibility in data are critical in the supply chain, from sourcing all the way down to patient care. But some of the things I've observed really is a priority for most organizations pre-COVID was, how do we establish reliability and stability in our supply chain? So it's like we're constantly looking how to optimize the flow of orders, identify CIP, so cost improvement plans, recognize areas of risk or excessive cost, and align and integrate the appropriate service and technology solutions that can begin to deliver value. Some of these came through well-documented CAPAs, to ensure their effectiveness. And then when COVID hit, it really accelerated the need not just to have reliability and stability, but also agility. How can we change direction in an effective and efficient way quickly to achieve the same or an improved desired outcome? And no company can do it alone, right? You have to rely on all key stakeholders who are a critical part of your supply chain, that end-to-end supply chain, that have that same agile mindset. So from a flexible production to accommodate changes in demand, to a balanced and integrated quality system, having that structured and established processes that can scale for growth, and just really having that ability to absorb knowledge to implement new practices. But the shift in having that agile mindset, I think, is so key now, that still complements that reliability and stability in the supply chain, focused around the transparency and visibility in data.
Yep, absolutely. Good thoughts. Tom, can I go to you next? What do you see the big changes?
Yeah, I think a lot of similarities to what Alexis was saying. I maybe say it a little bit differently as an IT person, but the whole need to mesh people and data together and get the right data to the right person on time. I think when people were working in the office, they had the value of a community there to work and share data around. And now in the COVID and post-COVID realities, is people are working individually, and they deal with pieces of the supply chain, pieces of the process, and you have to shape and tailor the data for their role in the process and in their role in the supply chain and executing the shipment. And so we've had to really scale down the data to the person and mesh the person and the data as these work processes have changed.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And that makes me think of Herman then, when we talk about kind of that cyborg meshing the human and the data together. So Herman, what have you seen?
First of all, I think it's important to repeat what Jim said. This is the corona crisis is just the beginning. We are entering the age of climate change. We are going to have disruptions, be it fires in California or here we had just a few kilometers away from my place, we had 182 killed by a massive waterfall or rainfall that we had. Absolutely extraordinary. Never had that before. So we are getting into a situation where supply chains, especially in the industry where we want to heal people, we want to help people be healthy, will be interruption all the time. And that basically has two answers, that challenge. The one answer is, let's go back to education that is stable, let's increase our inventories, let's basically go back to the times where we could operate stable in the dispersed world, or we move forward. And I think that's exactly where Tom's or Alexis' arguments count. If we have data, if we have transparency, if we know where things are, if we know where risks occur, where challenges come up, then we can manage even quicker and even more fragile medication. So I think there is not going to be let's go back to before Corona. We have to move forward, and we have to move significantly faster. And from my experience and my good friend David Bang, I mean, we worked on that, or he worked much more on that than I did actually in our previous lives. It was always these silos. the information was there. It was never connected. It was never brought down to, we have the product information, we have the GDP information, we have the shipment information, exactly where somebody has operated. And one thing we tend to oversee is that we are supply chain professionals, and all the praise of Jim is of course right. People are committed and so on. But the average education level that you have is enormously different from place to place. Yeah, and within the US, you may have a common set of qualifications. You go to places like Africa, Middle East, if you look at language hurdles that may be there, it's not a given that everybody fully understands what a temperature sensitive shipment is and how to handle that. And how he should handle an exception if he sees data indicating temperature, too high temperature in some parts of the shipment. So we have to make things simple, consistent, extremely data-driven, visible for everybody in the whole section. And when you asked these questions just a minute ago, obviously everybody would like to sleep well and know that somebody is taking care. If there was an exception, somebody would already start operating on it. And I don't have to look at every little movement of the needle and make sure that I induce basically the change. So I think we need to accelerate the way how we work together. We need to accelerate the use of data, and digital solutions are a path to that. But it's a big work because we are siloed. We are separate organizations. Everybody wants to keep data for himself, wants to be the one on the top of the data food chain, so to say. So there's a lot of work coming here. Yeah.
Yeah, great. And that's a beautiful segue to Saravan, who has, as I mentioned in the intro, is working on predictive. That's his passion. So Saravan, what is your insight of the before times and after times?
Yeah, I think Tom, Alexis, and Herman all caught all the points. So I'm going to go back to something that David said in the introduction. He briefly touched on it, which is COVID didn't really, COVID had a lot of impact in the supply chain, but it more so showed weaknesses and and it put stress on weaker links in the supply chain than anything else. So and likewise, from a technology and a data standpoint, it's nothing new. What we're talking about is not new. It's been around for the last 10 or 15 years. We've been talking about IoT devices. We've been talking about real-time monitoring devices. And there's been a lot of ongoing effort in terms of bringing the cost down, making it more affordable. But it's more of an industry-wide cultural change is what we are seeing in terms of, I'm going to use the same words again. Data is no longer one person's possession or one team's possession. I've seen some systems where, data belongs to IT or data belongs to a data analytics team within a pharma company, not quite so the operations team. So what we are starting to see is that sort of like the walls break down, the barriers break down. So we are, even within our customer interactions, we are seeing somebody from the data slowly start embedding themselves within the operations team. So the data starts making sense. For somebody who's not connected with the operations or quality, a temperature is just a number shown on a screen. It's 5 degrees Celsius. Well, what does it truly mean? It's actually, we keep talking about that's a patient. At the end of the supply chain is a patient, but is that really communicated across the board? Does everybody apply the same weightage to the data as they look at it? It's really not. That's not how we used to see it. I think that's what COVID changed. In practically working with teams in the pharma companies, that's what we're seeing. So there's a lot more awareness. There's a lot more acute awareness. That's one thing. The next big thing that we're seeing is, which is where we are passionate about, what we are working on is this historical note of thinking. At the end of the shipment, we're going to download some reports, and then we're going to send that report, and that's what the state of the art in terms of chain of custody and transparency. So we're going to send up this email this PDF file. Somebody's going to look at the PDF file and sign off on a shipment saying everything is good to go, thumbs up. And everybody's aware that 99% of the shipments, that's how it's been dealt with. But there is this transition in terms of what does real-time analytics really mean? Can data say something right now about what's happening to my shipment instead of me waiting to complete the shipment and then figure out what's going on? I think personally, this post-COVID, there's going to be a quantum surge in terms of how this IoT real-time data is going to change the way we think about what is the role of data in securing and this entire supply chain. So, interesting times in terms of how things are accelerating.
Absolutely, 100%. We have a question from the audience that is obviously very relevant. I think you sparked some thoughts from the audience. So from Lucas in Germany is asking, what are the biggest challenges you see to break down those silos? So Alexis, I want to start with you again. You're dealing with different kinds of data. Some of the others of us are dealing more with specific types of data, which has its own silos, but you're dealing with disparate data silos. So what do you see there, the biggest challenges?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I know Tom will chime in here too, since we align on a lot of projects together. I think the most important thing is to create truth within data. The one data source needs to remain true to itself from how it gets created, and whether it's from sourcing of raw materials all the way down through that end consumer point. But the data needs to stay one true data point through all the different systems or all the different touch points within the supply chain. When you have multiple versions of the data, wherever it might be within the manufacturing or production, to the inland freight, to the on the water, in the air, etc. When you have different truths, it's really hard then to create analytics or predictive analytics and really tell the story of what the data is saying. So it's really ensuring one data point, one truth, and how to create automation and integration throughout all the different stakeholders within the supply chain around that data point. And I know Tom, I'd love to hear Tom too share a little bit about his thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's very consistent. You know, I think it's the comments about siloed data, from my perspective of leading an IT department, data isn't siloed by its nature, but the use of data is siloed by its nature. And, you know, so what we're doing to combat that is we're starting to put all of our data that we either generate or we consume into a central data lake. And I'll promise not to get technical and lose the audience, but by putting all the data into a central database, then we can allow the systems and the processes to use the data as they were intended to use the data. And I think, you know, that's Alexis' comment about one version of the truth is that, you know, sometimes we bring data in and need to manipulate it for another downline system to use it. And then we've lost the beginning nature of that data and the beginning look and feel of that data. So we're storing all data in a data lake as we receive it, as it's in its natural state, and then pushing it out to the enterprise as the enterprise needs the data. And then on top of that data lake, we're building a workflow layer that says, okay, we need to use this data in a certain way for a certain process, and then we need to share it with either consumers, customers, manufacturers, whatever, but we're all using the natural state of the data. And it's a big leap. I mean, we hadn't been doing that in the past, and we're just starting to do it now. But I think in order to serve all the constituencies in a supply chain to the best you can, you need that central place where the data stays, and it stays in its natural state, and then build workflows on top of it and push it out.
Excellent. Yes. And that's when we've got all the data kind of together within our organization. But Saravan and Herman, I know that you guys are dealing with data coming from also different organizations. How do you break down those kind of silos?
Yeah,
Herman.
If I start. So I think the first challenge you have is that everybody's thinking, I have my data, I won't share it. And you have to find or create this willingness to say, okay, and that's this data lake concept in principle. It's all combined in one thing. And there are people, skillful people who can combine it and harmonize the definitions of what is a certain status of a shipment and so on. That comes from different sources. I remember in the past 10 years or what ago, we still looked into this one system that has the consistent process and where everything is in and everybody plays in that one machine, but that is not going to happen. So we are going to have different sources. We are going to have, and the smartness is in combining things that you may not have thought are relevant again and again. So you, like weather forecasts, like in ocean freight, the schedules changing, or a hurricane somewhere and suddenly the turnover time is 4 or 5 days more. these things, they are pretty advanced, but you can put all that into it. And that's why you start with these data lake projects. The output is normally a relatively simple one at the beginning because you get some basic things that you can define that work, that you can share with customers, that you can share with shippers and or carriers. And then you evolve it. And over time, you get more and more layers onto it and you make it useful. And BI experts look at the patterns they recognize. So I think it's once people understand that there's so much value to be created in this relatively immature supply chain industry. It is immature. We have massive inefficiencies. We know that. We have 30% of all shipment is paperwork. I mean, hey,
still
here in the room, it's and 30% I think is an optimistic view at it. And if you look at road freight, where I'm more engaged with Transporion, we have something like 25% of empty run in the US, in Europe. So trucks run empty and there's cargo along the line. They basically go from A to B and left and right of the motorway, there are shipments and they don't pick them up because they can't see them. So we are in an inefficient industry. So we have so much to gain. And it's not carrier or forwarder against shipper or the other way around. It's about putting things together and creating value against massive inefficiency that the industry has. That is quality leaks, it's all these things. So I think breaking that down and creating understanding for the price that we will all get if we share data and create common platforms that we can look into. I think that's the biggest thing to overcome this old thinking of this is mine and I'm not going to give that to anybody, to create a value out of it.
Absolutely. And thinking back to what Jim Fries was saying before, if we think about supply chain security and integrity, I mean,
yeah.
Come on. Saravan, I want to ask you, because I know that you're bringing data from different customers, even potentially together. So how does that work?
Yeah, I think it's a good question in terms of what are the biggest challenges in data silos. So from our vantage point, there's one stream of data which is more vendor specific data sets. So a particular delivery of a shipment involves a logistics provider. If you have a tracking device, you have tracking data source. You've got data source from the quality team or the packaging team that's actually packing and shipping the products. So there are vendor specific data sets that are really not that well connected today. So that's where, to us, that's where the first silo starts with. Every vendor is sort of has their own way of presenting the data. They all want to have their own dashboards. They all want to have their own notification alert systems. But truly, is that being effective or not? I think it's completely debatable. I've got a different perspective on it. But that's one stream, and there's got to be some synchronization in terms of how all these different vendors are handling data. The second challenge is it's actually within these biopharma organizations. I'm probably preaching to the choir here because the data is not that well shared within the teams that are inside these large organizations. Fundamentally, when we deal with biopharma companies, we get different team that has the packaging information. What is the container we are choosing? Why are we choosing the container? What was it based off of? And the product stability data resides with a different team. The quality data resides with a different team. The actual supply chain data, logistics data resides with a different team. So it's yes, vendors are not collaborating that well, but so are the teams within these biopharma companies are not collaborating. So there are actually two different barriers we need to break down to synergistically bring about it. And our philosophy is usually what drives success is a business process or a clearly defined business value. Pulling all these different data sources together is what would make this successful. That's what we are trying to go after. And if there is not a defined goal for why are we even doing this? Why are we connecting all these different data together? Because somebody that's been doing the same thing for 30 years, I've had these conversations where I don't want it. I'm going to get a data logger. I'm going to plug it to a computer. I'm going to send an email. Why are you changing my job profile? That's what the first thought process is. But I think in terms of, no. Here, the reason we do it is we can be that much more reactive, proactive in terms of preventing some of these excursions from happening. So starting with that, what is the business value we're looking to deliver? And which processes are going to affect it, are going to be improved by bringing all this data together? I think that definition is really critical. And then comes the terms of, let's break down, what vendor data streams we need, what internal data streams we need, and how do we merge those together to make it happen. So everybody's talking about the bottom-up approach. Let's connect the data. But unless there is the driving business value that's pulling all these together, I think that could be the way to break that barrier down and bring all these data streams together.
Absolutely. Everyone has a common goal. We just need to recognize that we all have the same goal, and then that makes it easier. So I have a couple more questions, and I also see someone has their hand up. I'd like to encourage you, if you have a question, to please type it in the Q&A so we can get it from that way. This question is, and I will read it so I don't mess it up. Herman and panel, appreciate you can elaborate further considering cybercrime is targeting not only elections like it happened during the German election just recently, but highly valuable medical data and or product related data. So cyber security, not only security of the medications that are being transported, but also cyber security. What is your take on that? Herman, I'll start with you, if I may.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, of course, it's a super relevant topic. I think no doubt about that. We are aware that there are bad guys around all the places, some more accidentally and some very intentional. I think it's a balance. We are now on a Zoom meeting, so that could be somebody could steal something from this or hack it in some way or another, or we should suddenly see somebody else telling us something completely different because he hacked it in and is now suddenly the speaker. So you always have to keep a balance between a maximum, obviously, of cyber protection, and you have to make sure that you do that and make sure that your data is protected. On the other hand, we should see the benefits. So we are at Transporeon, for example, I think cybersecurity is one of our key risks because we are system relevant. We operate 24 billion road freight in Europe and North America, and a little bit in Asia. And there's a lot of critical material in that. So obviously we have to be very sensitive, and we do every possible thing up to the point that it's very difficult to use our laptops almost in different environments with different technologies. So a lot of restrictions there. But there's always a residual risk. So again, exception handling is a critical thing. Do we have the teams available and the detection and sensitivity of people to recognize when something goes wrong? It's a learning experience. It's a lot of mistakes, as we know, don't come from technology that is not protecting well enough. It comes from people putting their passwords under the keyboard or whatever you have. Or this famous 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 keywords. So there's a lot of stuff that is behavioral. So it's change management. It's educating people about the risks. It is making that again and again. It is taking all technical precautions. And then I think you fare well. I think so far, touch wood, we haven't had a big any big issue in the last 18 years now. But we should always balance that against the massive value we can create. Against again, cost in supply chain for pharmaceutical products is relevant. It's not only relevant because pharmaceutical companies want to increase their profit. It is relevant because cheaper medication could help more people. So the cost that we take out in supply, nobody wants to buy a supply chain. I want my beta blocker. That's what I want. And I want the product. So nobody wants actually the supply chain. So our obligation is also to be super slick, super efficient, and make best of resources. And so we have to keep that in balance, do everything that is possible, and then really make sure that we capture the value that sits in the more intelligent data. And by the way, the data is now, so if somebody wanted to hack it, he could hack it already, only that he would have to go to different places maybe to get a combination. So I don't want to dilute the problem, but I would say let's do everything that we can do, but focus very much on the value we can create.
For sure. Tom, I'd like to hear from you. I'm sure you've had your share of cybersecurity incidents.
Yeah, and I think I agree with everything that Herman was mentioning, and I think maybe making it a bit more specific. I think we always have to look at the way that we communicate with one another and how we share information. And there's probably some very lax practices out there in terms of just emailing attachments and those kind of things. And in our way of looking at this, we're going to want to communicate via APIs, advanced program interfaces, where we can build in security and things like that, and really ratchet up the level of security that we have between the companies and there's a lot of times there's ways of doing things out of convenience that are easy and fast, and you can get things going quickly, and then there's the right way to do it. And I think we're all going to have to learn to take a little bit of extra time and do it the right way, and set up credentials and set up secure methods of exchanging and trading information and things like that. Because the weakest link of a security apparatus is just someone clicking on an email that's a phishing attack, and all of a sudden you have the bad guys in your network and they can see everything. So from a data perspective, and how do we secure data, how do we transmit data, kind of the topic of this panel, I think we have to take the extra time and communicate secure FTP, APIs, and other means of sharing data that is more secure than we've kind of let happen in the past.
Absolutely. Yes, it's a threat.
Yeah.
We do have another question from the audience here. So Alexis, I would like to put this one to you if I can. Mentioning supply chain agility as an element of focus in the future, how do you apply this when it comes to customer experience? Particularly when it comes to, particularly when it comes to changes in regulations, governmental regulations or political restrictions, but kind of supply chain agility and customer experience. How do you put those together?
Yeah, that is a very well thought question. I probably will need support from the other panelists on it, but what initially comes to mind of agility and thinking about regulations is around that digitalization and how important it is, because through digitalization, you can meet some of those regulations and find manufacturing efficiencies to address cost pressures. You can look at information to be shared quickly to connect the supplier and distributors. It's the connectivity and integration that occurs through digitalization, I think would probably be the best methodology through automation, smart sensors, social media, health apps, anything that can measure drug compliance or predict demand across the regions to support real-time manufacturing. I mean, I think there's so many tentacles to that question. I probably need a little bit more thought to articulate it in the right way. But agility will be critical, and just to align that with how do you keep up constantly with the counterfeit, what Jim spoke about, right? How do you use digitalization to help create counterfeit-proof medications with serial numbers that are trackable across the supply chain, ensure quality while meeting any sterilization requirements that are constantly changing? So it's a great question. I'm sure the other panelists and Dina, yourself from the customer experience within the pharma space can probably share a little bit more, but that would be my first response to that question. So great question. Well, whoever
it is
asked
a good question, and
yes.
it's a topic. Serialization has been around for at least 20 years, and since I've been doing this, which is a long time, and we haven't found the best solution for it yet. I think technology is getting us there, but there's still a ways to go. So thank you for your answer there. I do want to, I think we only have about 10 minutes left, so I do want to bring up one other topic. And again, I see another hand raised there. If you have, if you'd like to share something, please type it in the Q&A so we can address it that way. So what I would like to put again out here is, as I think David said in his introduction, digitalization is not just about technology. It's very, very much people-centric. And I know we all deeply believe that. And Herman, I know that you are really working at that intersection or that meshing, as Tom said earlier. So when you think about, you mentioned this a little bit when you were talking earlier, Human, about the human behaviors, or when we talk about the environment, sustainability, social justice and equality even. These are all things that we can improve through digitalization. I'd like to hear, starting with Herman, your thoughts on that, and then I'd like to go around and let everybody have a chance to share.
Yep, thank you very much. It is very obvious. We are talking, in the end, decisions are made by real people, and decisions are made throughout the whole process of any supply chain. We are talking about people that typically would not meet each other at any time. There's no meeting, there's no conference, there's no no give me five. It's just people that are interconnected with a common purpose. And so if you want to apply change to that and say, hey guys, change your behavior. We want to work together suddenly. We want to share data. We want you to be able to interpret data that is not yours, has not been created by your own, not even by your own organization. We want you to read dashboards where in the past you had your light yellow, light pink, and light green pieces of paper. We want you to understand QR codes in a much better way. We want you to pick up good distribution practices that may be European ones or the American ones. So then we have to connect people through, and we make them aware that they have to adopt to new practices. And I think that's this agility, this element of agility is something that you have to introduce into an organization where people do not even work on a consistent basis, because shipments go to one place and they go to another one. That's why this whole theme of digital adoption and connecting a network, creating a network that works together is so important. And that's a role that also JAS has to play, that you connect people in your carrier organization or outsourced supply chain services through a platform that they know and have an access point to knowledge, to information that is relevant to what they are doing. So that's why I think this whole education thing and digital adoption thing is such an important basis or platform for what we need if we want to succeed in our path here.
Absolutely. Who would like to go next? Saravan, I'm going to go to you.
Yeah. So I think in terms of what Herman was saying was spot on. End of the day, the decision or the action is a human action. It's a human intervention is required. You may have a predictive signal notifying that in the next couple of hours something is going to go bad with a particular shipment, but that's how far the digitalization can go, right? And after that, what do we do with that information, and who's going to react on that? I think that's where the true interaction comes in. The challenge is, the way I see it is it's heavily been, when people are trained to do these functions, they're trained to follow a fixed SOP. Now, here is SOP, here is a set of things that you have to do when something happens. Well, a true data-driven or an intelligence-driven operation cannot be a static SOP, because some of those signals may tell you something that's no longer, you cannot capture all of those events if then events in your SOPs. So it's a big mind shift, mindset change in terms of how do we truly become data driven or real-time intelligence driven versus just a static SOP driven. That's where all of this, transparency, visibility, how do we gain true value out of this is how do we convert it into action? Well, the problem is your SOPs are never going to be comprehensive enough to leverage all the value that the data is bringing out to you. So training and building it into the core of the team itself to be reactive to data signals and believing in those signals rather than, no, here's how I used to do 30 years. I'm going to do the same thing now. I'm not going to change that. How do we break that barrier? How do we train teams to go do that? I think that's definitely a challenge. How do we deal with that? And I think it starts with communicating and training the team from the core itself.
And I think it goes back to that value, as we were saying before too. When people understand what they're doing and how it contributes to the whole, then I think it makes it a little bit easier to get that change in mindset. Tom and Alexis, I'm going to give you guys, I think we have about 5 more minutes to wrap it up. So I'm going to give you the last final words on this topic. So same question.
Yeah, just briefly, I think I would probably echo a lot of the same things that have been mentioned already. But when I saw this question and your briefing to us, it was like you immediately jumped to the technology side of this, and how can technology aid in this? And in my mind, digitalization really comes down to the 3 things, and they've been mentioned: connecting, communicating, and collaborating. And I think we need to use the technology to allow us to do that more efficiently, more meaningfully, and have results-oriented completion of those kinds of things. That's what we should be using technology for. I don't think we should be using technology to eliminate the humans from having to connect, communicate, and collaborate. And a lot of times I think, we're put in a place in the technology realm says, hey, go solve this problem for me, when the problem is really better solved by giving the people the tools who really understand the dynamics of what they're working on. I mean, in data, it's on or it's off, and it's yes or it's no. But yes means all of these other things that it's really tough to train a computer to do. And so, I think the technology and digitalization should be to be a better asset for the humans to connect, collaborate, and communicate.
Awesome. Thank you. Alexis, tough act to follow there.
Yeah, I mean, all three gentlemen, I don't know how to follow that, so I'll keep it very simple. But I loved one of the words Herman used about adoption, is if you're able to create adoption within the organization, that digitalization is really about transformation and not disruption of the supply chain, which will really allow companies to integrate their supply chains to make them more adaptable and responsive. And to what Tom said, the human element is still key in that process. So I think that's just a huge piece, is really from the adoption, the human element. But the gentleman said it best. I have no other words to use to give you a response, but that would be it. Is really, it's about transformation and not disruption.
Excellent. Awesome. Thank you all very much. I do have one other question here, and Henning, I'm gonna send this to Saravan because it's to you directly, Saravan, asking for some best practices. So I will connect the two of you, speaking of connection and collaboration. Thank you all very, very much for sharing your thoughts with us today. Super insightful. I'm really, really glad to have heard from all of you. I'm very happy that my dogs decided also not to contribute to the conversation today, so very proud of them. And back to you, David.
Thanks, Dina.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. And that was I was so consumed with all the conversation going. I was so focusing on it, right? I almost missed a cue. That's how intriguing the conversation was. And I wish we can have more time, but definitely keep the questions coming. As Dina said, we can actually channel those questions to the proper panelists or the entire group. So our next session will also going to be very, very interesting, very, very timely as well. And I'd like to ask our next panel moderator, Frank, and the panelists to turn on their videos, microphones. I know if this was a physical seminar or a physical conferences, usually, everybody kind of move around a little bit, go up to the stage, and we get a little cup of coffee, whatever. But I know it's a virtual, so things are really quickly moving. So it looks like we got everybody kind of lined up, and with the panelist and the moderator. So Frank, I will hand it over to you. You kind of disappear. Oh, there we go. You got to unmute. Yep.
Yeah, 1 second here.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, David. Can you hear me? Hope so.
Yes, we can. Yes.
All right, great. Thank you. Appreciate it. And a slight technical difficulty, but we managed to work that out. So thank you again. I'm Frank Cascante. I'm the global head of sales for our pharmaceutical and healthcare vertical here at JAS. And on this morning, I have the privilege of co-hosting and moderating our panel, which is based off of on ocean freight transportation within our focus of the challenging times within our industry. And accompanying me is a very distinguished group of industry professionals. Let me briefly introduce them to you. I'll begin with Mr. Bill Duggan. Mr. Bill Duggan is a North American representative today of Eskison Advisory, a very prominent ocean shipping and container consulting firm. Prior to that, he spent 33 years at Maersk Line in numerous senior liner as well as managing director roles, spending time as expatriate in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, as well as being a member of the Mersline Executive Board and Executive Team. Bill, truly an honor to have you here. Thank you for sharing time this morning with us. In addition to that, we also have Nico Putvarken. Nico is a global reefer manager at Hapag-Lloyd in technical sales and product engineering, overseeing a great deal of the deployment of the pharmaceutical and reefer in general products throughout their global footprint. Prior to finishing his studies in maritime economic support management with a bachelor's degree in science, he was also a cadet sailing across the vessels in cargo handling, navigation, and maneuvering. Nico, thank you again for being with us. Preceded then by my colleague Unai Gayastegui. Unai is the JAS Intra-LATAM Trade Lane Manager for our ocean products and procurement and deployment of our services, where he joined in June of this year. Prior to that, Unai spent a distinguished career with the Kuehne+Nagel organization for more than 26 years in country management, product operations, implementation, as well as sales. So thank you, Unai. And lastly, but not least, is Jesper Jepsen. Jesper is the head of the ocean product for the Americas, overseeing the product deployment, the procurement, as well as our service offering within the NVOCC space, as well as prior to that, holding the role of head of LCL product for North American organization. And prior to that, Jesper spent nearly 20 years with the SHIPCO organization in country management, as well as regional management organization. So I thank you all. This is a very distinguished group of industry professionals, and we'll proceed next as part of our flow, which is as what you've heard with Dina. We're going to, before we get into the questions, we're going to have a poll. So we have the ability, we have two central questions to add context to our conversation centered around ocean freight. The first one, which is what's the largest origin region for your company, to add some depth to our conversation. This is question one, and it'll be followed by the second one. So let's give ourselves a couple of seconds here. We see the respondents are coming in good. Thank you. All right. Great. Give it a few more seconds here. Let's see here. All right. I would say we could probably take a good temperature of the feedback at this point. So the question again, which is the largest ocean origin region for your company? And from our participants, this looks at Asia Pacific with 50%, Europe 26%, North America 11%. All right, so let's keep that in mind as we address the questions, and then we'll go to the next question. And the second question, which is the largest ocean destination region for your company? Again, with the focus of adding context to our conversation for ocean reefer and pharmaceutical challenges within our space. Let's give ourselves a few seconds here. A lot of activity. All right. Well, this one's much closer. So the feedback here is looking at North America, 30%, followed by Asia Pacific, 25%, Europe, 17%. So much more even, almost even split within the information. Great. Thank you all for participating. Appreciate that. Again, we'll take that into context. And as we move forward into the sessions of the part of the questions, we want to start with very high level ocean industry challenges, kind of a state of affairs. It's obviously a very important question. It's one that we live every single day, and particularly from this esteemed group, I believe that there's a great deal of wealth that could be shared with our audience. And secondly, we'll drill down or delve more into the pharmaceutical, reefer, and the logistics container space. So within that, I'd like to begin first with very high level question. Bill, I'd like to start with you, if that's okay. If you could describe in a few words current state of ocean freight, reefer and dry freight, of course, because one impacts the other. And it goes along to our conversation as we had last week, which was very eye-opening for me, what you had shared. So I think that the audience would really benefit from this. So.
Yes, so thank you, Frank. Thank you, Jazz. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you're at. Yeah, so when Frank approached me on this, it was very timely because there's so much fluidity in the supply chain right now. Where there's problems, there's also opportunities for improvement. So really, it's this seminar is very timely and needed. So we all know before COVID, the markets globally were probably growing in the 2 to 3% range. But in particular, the refrigerated business was growing even faster, somewhere between the 4 and 6% range. Well, of course, COVID came on, and now we have a situation that's different. I would call it's maybe not unprecedented. We've had these problems in the past, World War II and other areas where commerce completely stopped. So we're thrown a major curveball right now, and unfortunately, our supply chain is very much backed up, and there's problems across the whole supply chain right now, whether it's at origin terminals due to labor or due to the virus shutting down terminals like Yantian and Tianjin, or some of the others that have happened over the last number of months. Then cargo gets moved when it finally gets off the port, and then it comes in and it arrives at origins, at destinations, and there's just nowhere to move. So, classic example, of course, is in LA Long Beach, where you have the bunching right now, plus 60 containers, and it changes every day, but it's a high number. So I think if we have an opening statement, there's significant challenges in the supply chain right now, both not only on the ocean side, but also on the domestic side, from warehouses, trucking, rails, the distribution center. And yeah, this is not for the faint of heart, this business. As we know, transportation in the past was, and I'm talking, 10 years ago, maybe, it was more of something there. Nobody really paid attention to it as much as they should have. And now, of course, it's the most important part of the supply chain. How do we get access to our goods? So times ahead are going to be interesting, Frank.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. I appreciate that. I'd like to open the floor for Unai or for Jesper if you have any additional comments onto that, please.
Yeah, I can start. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I mean, we can really just echo what Bill was saying here. It's everything is kind of stretched to the limit right now. It's a very good stress test for our industry here in terms of what we do well and where we can make some changes. It's time also. Governments and people alike are starting to recognize what is needed, and infrastructure, being able to move, make sure we take care of everybody working in the industry, sailors, truck drivers, warehouse workers, everybody that's kind of keeping us going in this industry to help clear up this situation that's going on. We've seen many vessel recovery or scheduled recovery initiatives from the carriers try to get back on track. However, if we don't fix the landside issues, the vessels will never get back on track. And with all the vessels we are seeing outside LA, vessels outside Shanghai, Ningbo ports, they have fuller cargo, or they need to offload, so we cannot just send them anywhere else and try to get back on track and kind of do a reset on the entire industry. So very important that we start fixing things, getting things moving, and recognize where we have issues so we can get back on track. And being able to maneuver in this environment to secure your supply chain is very important. Price is not really an issue anymore. Now it's who can you trust, who can help you, and how do you move your product.
Thank you, Jesper. Unai, would you like to add any comments?
Not much to add to the comments that Bill and Jesper did, just to say that this is to stay. It will take a few months until this gets solved, and it's time to work more closer together than any time before.
Agreed. Excellent. I'd like to add to that, this is the second part of this question, which is very recently, we have all read of the congestion at the ports off of California, of course, the 61 ships a few weeks ago, which, by the way, the number's much higher now. A great deal of this, obviously, is because of the COVID-19 pandemic period we're living in, and the congestion and the challenges that's brought to global supply chains. But my question to this panel is, yes, we recognize the COVID-19 impacts definitely are prevalent in that, but was there something, that led to the precondition? I mean, were there already serious or problems in the congestion of ports and vessels prior to that, that necessarily might not have had to do directly with COVID?
So,
Bill, go ahead.
I was going to say, so I'll take that one, Frank. Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question when you look back and you say, let's look at the state of affairs today. I'll start with the terminals, and on the terminals itself, you have a different operating model in the US versus, say, Europe. Europe, the terminals are much more active. They're 24/7 in most cases, weekends. The logistics runs differently in Europe, whereas in the US, you have these labor unions, which are running our terminals pretty much on the ILWU on the West Coast, and of course the ILA on the East Coast. And those contracts that are with the carriers today, they're pretty straightforward. If you look at an operating company like Maersk or Hapag-Lloyd or any of these other companies, at night and on weekends, they're paying excess costs to operate the terminals, get the ships in and out. So obviously when the costs before, and I'm talking before COVID, were marginal, and I mean marginal, some of these rates were pathetically low, operate by the carriers, why would they need to, expend all this excess money to keep these terminals open at excessive rates? So I think that was and is a major issue. I know Wall Street Journal yesterday, Mario Cordero, he came out publicly and basically said that that's one of the issues that needs to be addressed. And clearly that is an issue. Then you look at the rails, the rail operators and how they run the trains, all that, 30 to 40% of everything that comes off on the the West Coast goes on rails eastbound. That has to improve. People operating warehouses and trucking companies and all of that. So it's a myriad of things in North America. I think it caught a lot of people by surprise. It was going along on time. Service by the shipping lines into the ports was not good on average compared to years past, where it was the top priority by the carriers. So there's a bunch of things that have contributed before COVID that would need improvement, and now you add on top of that COVID, and thereby what we have today is a result of all of that.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, sir. Excellent. Well, we have a question here from the audience, but I'm going to hold out. It's a great question, but I want to, before that, go to a prelude of that. And Nico, I'm going to see and ask you if you could provide some contribution to this one, which is specific about pharma and ocean shipping. And the question is, though the majority of pharma and healthcare shipments, of course, reefer and general cargo or non-temp control do move via ocean. It's still relatively a small percentage of the global amount of total containers. Depending which data source you look at, it could be 3 to 5%. Other sources could have it somewhere between 7 to 8% of, say, total volume of that part that moves as pharma. Within that scope, why is pharma still such an important commodity for the ocean carriers? And in this case, we obviously know it is very important for Hapag-Lloyd with the types of products that you're rolling out. Maybe if you could add some feedback to that, please.
Yeah, thank you, Frank, and hello to everyone. Of course, first of all business is interesting for us, but I think pharma especially is a business where we can see and where we can provide value to the customers, especially when we talk about conversion from air freight to sea freight, using economies of scales, and also providing cooling with reefer equipment, which is active cooling, so a very reliable source. Besides that, it's also a driver for future products or developments in the business. And I think that's really important when we see GDP over the last years, which took more and more, or had more and more influence on the maritime sector. This is also a driver for the whole industry.
Excellent. And now I'd like to then add to that the question from someone from our audience that I think relates directly to that, which is what innovations in ocean freight, in the ocean freight industry, you view as the most beneficial for pharma and healthcare transportation at this point?
So I'll take that one.
Okay.
I think, clearly innovation is the key, and visibility in the supply chain, especially in pharma, is absolutely critical. So the technologies that have been embedded inside reefer containers, whether it's Globe Tracker or whether it's Orbcom or some of the other type of companies that provide the visibility of the temperature of the product and the availability and location of the product is critical. Some of the technology allows for the pulp temperature, or the actual cargo itself, which is absolutely critical. It shows the deviations of the cargo temps, and when you move pharma, obviously you have to be very precise in where the temperature readings are. So if there's any deviations, it allows, whether it's on a vessel or on a land, it allows the technicians to quickly and accurately adjust and make the necessary changes to bring it together. So I think clearly on technology, the carriers are and have been investing. It's not full scale yet. Some carriers are doing it more than others, but it has to be, going forward, that has to be the technology where the owner of the cargo can trace and watch the product itself from origin all the way through destination once it's in the custody of the carriers.
Yes, sir. Agree. Yes. Nico, would you like to add anything more on the technical side? As I know this is a great deal of what you deploy globally on a daily basis within the pharma space.
I can totally agree there with Bill. I think the transparency is, or what drove, what Pharma drove was transparency, or is still transparency with our own product that we are developing and enhancing to the requirements of the customers, and also getting some new insights to the whole supply chain. So yeah, I think transparency is what drives, or what Pharma is driving is transparency. Yeah.
Excellent. Good. I want to move on to another question, which is the unit itself. So obviously the refrigerated 40 high cube container, the backbone of an industry, similar type of technology, right? That's used for perishables, i.e. non-pharma, fruit, flour, vegetable, frozen proteins, or for pharma within our space, for pharma projects, you'll have segregated pools, right? Of some exclusively for pharma, whilst the others would be for other commodities. But my question, I want to say, in terms of reefer container pools themselves, we know that there are challenges globally within the supply chain for containers in general, but I'd like to go a little deeper into reefer period. What types of challenges are you seeing within reefer fleets today, reefer deployments, as it relates to the broader challenge that we have? And I'll open this up to it.
Yeah, I could take that, Nico, if it's okay. And then you could chime in. So one of the biggest challenges in today's environment, and I'm talking about now, is that in a run up into COVID, the reefer rates really, have been low, comparatively speaking, to the investment by the carriers. Dry rates also were low. But then post-COVID, the dry rates have tripled and quadrupled, but the reefer rates never followed. So now you're starting to see reefer rates go up, but they're not going up in the same quantum that dry rates go up. So what happens? Now you have a shortage of dry equipment because there's more, all the ships that are deployed, or all the ships that are in the market today, and it's just over 5,000 ships globally, container ships, they're all deployed right now because all the carriers are just grabbing these ships and inserting them into the strings because the congestion is so bad that they have to be at origin. It's most likely in China and some places in North Asia that they have to be at their window or they go to the back of the queue. So the origin cargo gets the attention, and then they put 2 or 3 ships in a string just to make sure that there's a catch-up capability to get at the berth window. And once that's loaded, then they take the slow, circuitous route home or back to where it's the destination. But the problem with that is they're carrying containers as well. So thereby the supply of dry containers is hand to mouth. So what carriers have done is they have taken refrigerated containers, in some cases pretty aggressively, and inserted that into the movement of non-operating reefers for the dry cargo. So that has also absorbed a good portion of the refrigerated equipment that's out there. On top of that, you have manufacturing going on, and the average manufacturing of reefer containers is somewhere around 150,000 40-foot high cube reefers a year in the factories in China. I just saw, for instance, MCI, Maersk Container Industry, has just sold their factory to CMIC, which, now you're down to about 2 container manufacturers of reefer, and they're both in China, big ones. So you have an issue as well that the market has grown about the same percentage as what the investment or productivity is on the equipment as well on top of that. So you have a myriad of things happening, but I would envision that going forward that the rates that are out there pre-COVID will no longer be acceptable for the rates post-COVID. So you'll see a paradigm shift and rates will start to go up, but how far they go up on reefer containers is yet to be seen, but the supply continues to be tight. Containers are in certain locations in abundance and in other locations in deficit. Right now, if you're sitting in South America and you're looking at your grape season coming up, you should be worried. You've got a lot of problems because all of the break bulk ships are deployed now because they were on their way out. Now they're back in business again just because the supply chain is so fractured at this stage.
Thank you, Bill. Great. I'd like to open it up for the rest of the panel for Nico, Jesper, and Unai, please.
Yes, from my side, not very much to add there. I think, yeah, the uneven cargo flow worldwide is already mentioned. We try to move the cargo or the containers as non-operated reefers. But from my back, from my from my perspective, from a quality technical perspective, nothing more to add there.
All right, thank you. Unai and Jesper, anything other to add to this?
I think Bill gave a very clear picture of the situation and what's coming ahead. I think to highlight what the break bulk operator versus for reefers, that they are back in the game, and that this will put a little bit of pressure on the container size as well, cargo.
Agree, fully. Excellent. Well, let me then go back to the part of, say, technology reefer for pharma specifically. We continue to delve further down into the detail, and Nico, I'll start, or I'll pitch this first part of the question to you, please, which deals with unplug power transition time, right? So one of the major challenges of pharma temperature control air freight conversion to ocean freight, from a quality perspective, from a kappa, from a data consistency, it's a temperature consistency across different event milestones, is in the ocean container world, the power transition time, the unplug time, right? From site to chassis to vessel to whether it's ground power or chassis, and then onto gantry cranes and onto the vessels. What in this case, from your perspective, what is being done to create a much better solution of quality control around that, please?
Thank you. I think it's really necessary to first of all understand that we see for a normal port-to-port shipment, we have for power off times or plug out times when the reefer gates in at the terminal, it's loaded to the vessel, discharged at the port of discharge, and then gated out again. So I think it's first of all necessary to understand that this is the typical process there. From our side, what we have done so far, and this is now slowly developing as well, we have implemented a high value process, which is from our side analyzing possible risk with local operation teams and the terminals. So do the terminals, what kind of power off times do they see? But also, do they have specific unplug or specific processes to minimize the power off times? And from there on, once we assess the risk and we start to highlight the booking in our own system, but also highlighting it to other external stakeholders, which is, of course, internally, it's starting from equipment dispatch, triggering an extended PDI, but on the other side, also informing our vessel planners and our local operations of the high value reefers. This will then result in them stowing them on our vessels in, let's say, favorable positions, and also advising the vessels to keep power off times at a minimum. But on the other side, for the terminal operation, it triggers the specific Pharma processes, so to minimize the power offs. I think this is the first step which we took. Now it's about creating transparency also for power off times, because I think what we heard from our customers a lot is what was it a power off? What was the reason for the power off? And I think that this is really where the whole industry has to take the next steps. And there is also, again, what we discussed a little bit earlier with the remote monitoring options that are in the market. We will be able to do this, and this will also currently with our own product, we're enhancing it, showing the power offs or what in future will show the power offs when they are happening, but also gathering experience, gathering data for average power off times, which is currently not the state of art. And I think creating this and providing such information in the future also has a large impact. And then the third thing there for me is that to create new products. And we are currently reviewing how we can bring the benefits of our own high value process, not only to high value reefers, but also to more sensitive cargos, and then of course to Pharma. And I think these are the 3 points how we want to improve the power offs in future and making it acceptable to convert more and more ocean air freight cargo to ocean.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Nico. I'll open it to the rest of the panel. Bill, if you'd like to add something. Jesper, please feel free.
Yeah, I think Nico, hit the nail on the head with that. Technically, when you really break it all down, there's going to be a period of off time between the transfer from, say, truck power onto land power at the terminal, and then from terminal plugs onto the vessel. But these are really minimal in comparison to, what would damage the product according to, the technology that's out there for visibility on the movement. So I wouldn't add much to what Nico said. It's, there is power off periods, but they're minimal. And as you flag them and as you put them as high priority red flag cargo, the attention is there because it comes in either into a special holding area or it goes into immediate action once received at the terminal. So, it all comes back to claims at the end of the day, and how a company's looking at claims and what type of claims that are out there. In the past, the carriers would be very reluctant to release any of the data unless you had contractual obligations. Now it's becoming even more common that, through the transparency that carriers have those in their contracts or the importer or shipper has that in their contract to be full access to visibility on it. So that has improved significantly. In the past years, when a container moved into a destination, let's call it, let's say it moves a pharma box moved from India into Africa or into the US or something, they would have to find that container. They would have to go down and do a download of the container, and that that took a long time. Sometimes that container just got loaded back out because it wasn't, it was needed right away, and then you have to chase it to the next destination. All of that has changed through the power of technology. So technology is now allowing for the more visibility, and Power Off is becoming more visible. And when it becomes more visible, the carriers pay more attention to it and the terminals pay more attention to it because claims in that type of industry, are critical. And, the value of the cargo is so high that you have to put red flags around every movement of that cargo. And I believe the carriers do that, as Nico has said.
Excellent. Thank you, Bill. I want to ask Unai, because to add a bit more, particularly within your focus of the Latin American impact that you've played, not only now here within JAS, but from your past experiences, you've played or you've had many prominent roles within reefer traffic. And what do you see within Latin America in terms of this topic of performance of managing the power transition time, the unplug to the plug time? Maybe I want to see if you could add a bit more depth to that. And how does Latin America, as a developing part of the world, and by the way, one of the world's largest reefer origins for fresh fruits and potentially from frozen proteins again, and it's becoming very important for pharma. Brazil, very large manufacturer. Mexico, also very important. Maybe if you could add a bit of insight onto how Latin America fares within that of what Bill and Nico have shared, please.
Sure. Thank you, Frank. I think the main challenge when the cargo comes into Latin America is not on the seaway part. I think comes when the container has been discharged in the port and all the process until it gets delivered to the final customer. What we have seen so far is that in some of the countries, they have processes that they are much faster than the others, such an example like Panama, Uruguay, and Chile, where the flows after the cargo arrives till the cargo is delivered, they are between 3 to 5 days maximum. And we have some other countries like Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, where the processes, they are much more complex. As a highlight, I have to say that in the last 12 months, the governments in some countries like Brazil have sped up the process for customs clearance. So I think this is a light that we see. And definitely it will help the industry not to have containers sitting in the ports or in the warehouses for 20, 30 days waiting for customs releases. So in this respect, I think that the industry is moving forward.
Excellent. Thank you. Jesper, is there anything that you'd like to add?
No, really only one of the things that's really, I agree with Unai, the big challenge comes after the container has landed and getting it delivered. And it's an important job to make sure we have redundancy in place and we take care of the cargo once it gets delivered and have backups ready if things does go wrong. In a normal supply chain, things usually works in a beautiful way, but having having a way and making sure that your partners, your truckers, whoever is part of the supply chain knows what to do and have their eye on the ball constantly. So have agreements in place to secure it all the way.
Super. Thank you. Well, we have two great questions from our audience that I'd like to go through quick. And the first one is, would passive cooling solutions replace refrigerated electromechanical type systems if it could store temperature sensitive products for a duration of 30 to 40 days, for instance? And I'd like to add a little bit more of this because it's something very dear and to my heart from one of my professional experiences working for a passive engineering and insulation materials and PCM manufacturing company. And so there have been significant advancements in PCM with phase change material, which is a super high performance insulating material used within the air freight industry mainly, and some road freight. But I want to just pose this question to our panelists: is if there were, or what have you seen as a potential replacement of, let's say, the genset, the actual electromechanical part of generating the energy or the electricity within a container, if it could be replaced with a very sophisticated, I don't know, panels of phase change material, which is something that is used today within the pharmaceutical space for the passives, the passive air containers, which are now designated per IATA hybrids. So they're the ones that are, say, metallic in exterior structure, yet have no electromechanical engineering, and just really the insulation or the energy is retained from the type of insulation and cooling briquette type systems. But just a general question for this audience: if you see that that could potentially replace traditional reefer systems.
Go, is that you?
Yeah, I will go first then. Currently, or what I have seen in this position over the last 3 years now, I haven't seen any proposition to replace the current reefer system in how it is currently used. And I think when we talk about reefers, there also has to be kept in mind what it's used for as well. So for bananas, which are also producing heat, and you try to remove the heat outside of the cargo itself, which we don't see with pharma, for example, is producing heat itself through respiration, because there is no respiration. So for now, I haven't seen any option which will substitute the reefer or the cooling of the reefer for now. But
all right, excellent.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I know from a leasing company has advised us early this year is that during the summer there was a 2 or 3 week shutdown of manufacturing as they were converting over to a different paint and type of pigment to become more green, and allowing the unit itself to be transformed into a different type of material used on the manufacturing, and that is all towards keeping the box itself cooler than it has in normal transit. I don't know all the technical stuff on it, but Frank, I could get those details and send them to you, and you could transmit it out. But there is a change in the manufacturing with the paint used on the unit itself, on the container, and that's taken place and has been taking place since this summer in China at the manufacturing yards for reefer.
Excellent, thank you. Well, and then along with that, and this is the next question, which I truly love, which is, how does the panel envision the role of ocean freight in bringing vaccines to the world within 1 to 3 years? As we know today, the majority of the vaccines, all the global 5 major manufacturing types of vaccines, and where they're elaborated in primarily will go through air freight, i.e. at minus 70 to 80 with dry ice and VIP panels, or new authorizations from the respective ministries of health of the large population sites are coming in with a minus 20 to minus 30 C type authorization for the vaccines, and there are some at 2 to 8 also. Obviously, depending what temperature, there's an effect to the shelf life of it. But within that, where do you see as the panel, at what point do you think ocean freight can begin to take a larger portion of that?
I don't mind kicking that one off,
Sure.
guys. I remember one of the biggest impediments we had in my previous employment was, you know, when we looked at the on the liability side, you know, the value of the cargo itself against the insurance that was to be allowed to you know, for the coverage of that movement. And in the contractual obligations that were sent to us, whether it was through J&J or Merck or whoever the companies were, when we were looking specifically at that type of thing of conversion, that was always a holdup, and it was an issue because we couldn't get past that. Now, I'm not sure, I've been kind of out of that part of it for a while. I'm not sure if Nico, you have more on that one, but I could tell you that was at Big Blue there. That was a big issue. And, you know, we wanted, of course, to be a participant, and we were really trying to get more involved in the conversion from air to ocean. But on the liability clauses, it was just very difficult for us because one container goes bad, and, you know, it could be millions and millions of dollars in cargo value. And, you know, that's a tough one to swallow.
It certainly is. Thank you, Bill. Nico or Unai or to Jesper, if you wish to comment on this.
I can go with
Okay.
it.
Thank you, Nico.
Yes, I think it definitely is, or what we see with Pharma already through the conversion in the last few years, it is very different to what we see to other cargos in reefers. So we have similar cargos which have a very similar sensitivity. Don't get me wrong, bananas and reefer and Pharma is not the same, but bananas are really sensitive as well. But what is different is the cargo weight. Bananas, we have, let's say 20 tons inside the reefer, which is also the terminal mass during power offs, and provides cooling in that time, so to speak. While we have only, let's say, 2.5 tons in the same volume for Pharma. And based on this, we also have very low cargo weight, a very low cargo weight, but still a much higher value, which Bill also advised there. And but what we also see is it's not always high value. There's also different cargo, and I think creating a plannable supply chain for customers where you can see what is the power of times at that port, and creating creating that not the productivity, but making sure that you have the same outcome each time you ship that cargo. I think that's the main thing which we have to work on as an industry if we want to provide, or if we want to shift more cargo from air to ocean.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well,
maybe not in the vaccines, Frank, but definitely we see more and more conversion from pharmaceuticals that in the past they were shipped from air freight into sea freight. But yes, agree with Bill. I mean, the extended liabilities and cargo value, definitely they are the main challenges for the industry to shift the vaccines.
Agree. Thank you. Thank you all. And we have run out of time because we have 4 minutes left. And I wanted to ask one more question, but we'll save it for the next version of it, or follow-up questions from the audience if you wish, which is refrigerated or ocean reefer container LCL. we're getting a great deal of requests from our pharmaceutical and healthcare customers into that. Today, the data sharing culture is changing. Nico, you've proved that to us in the willingness to really share and converge data types to be able to create a much more precise picture for our companies and in effect make us better operators. So we applaud you for that. But in general, there's a great deal of need for an ocean reefer LCL service on some short sea shipping lanes, i.e. 10 to 12 days. The technology's there, the data, the visibility, the traceability is also there. But so Jesper, I owe you that one for next time, because I want to leave a few minutes here for David Bang to close us up, and wanted to thank this esteemed panel. Truly an honor for me to be participating here with you all. And thanks to the audience for the great questions. Excellent. David, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for just just a fascinating conversations, and plus, I think from the audience perspective, so many questions. I know we couldn't even get to all the questions that were listed here, besides some of the questions we're naturally having a conversation about. So please, feel free to just, we're gonna of course save all this question that were not answered. We're gonna make sure we take care of you. So that you get the proper answers to that, and of course that leads to our sort of a next closing section here. So let me just make sure that we get into that here. All right. So I mean, I think once again it was just a fascinating conversation for sure, and I think the as Jim Freeze also mentioned earlier as a keynote, there's a key takeaways and call to actions for all of us. I mean, Jazz is just a one part of that equations. I mean, we need to work with you if you are pharma and healthcare manufacturers and distributors, or you're in the shipping line, or ports and airports or airlines, or any type of logistics or technology. This is the moment, I think the COVID really taught us that this is the moment that we truly need to connect and collaborate and have a full of a compassion for the future, and so that we can prepare for the future disruption. So identify your key takeaways. And I know my key takeaway was that from a data perspective, there's just plenty of data out there. It's not about where is the data, do we even have the data? It's about where can we find them and how can we connect them? And also it's about the human behavior aspects. When it comes to ocean freight, I think we have a very well established experts, market experts out there, such as the panelists that we heard from. We just need to listen to each other better and really take some actions deliberately for the better future. Now, I want you to be an active and advocate, and wherever you are, you can be an active advocate for that connectivity, collaboration, communication, compassion, and ultimately the patient safety, the care, and in compliance. And lastly, I would like you to also share your stories at our next webinar or blogs or within your own network. Do share, because the stories do matter, and stories create another stories, and often it truly make a huge impact. Now, I'd like to thank the speaker, Jim Freeze, the panelists, and the moderators to make this webinar truly successful. And most of all, I'd like to thank you, the audience, who participated and actively listening in, and from the beginning to the end, and ask those fantastic questions. We truly appreciate that. You will receive a survey link. And so make sure you share your thought about this particular event so that we can make it better. We can make it much more useful to you and your organizations and your network of people. And stay in touch with us. I'm following us on the LinkedIn for our next webinar. We will schedule sometime in middle of November. And so please stay tuned for our next webinar. Once again, thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful day. Take care now. Bye-bye.